You are listening to the Global Travel Channel podcast show, and I am your host, Mark Philpott. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome back. It's great to have you here. No matter where you're listening around the world, I hope that you are safe and well and not going too crazy staying at home. Well, the good news is you can listen to podcasts, and this is a great one to listen to, the Global Travel Channel, because I have inspiring guests from all over the world who want to chat about their incredible travel experiences. Many of them changed their lives because of their travel experience, and maybe their stories might motivate you to have a look at traveling a little bit more, because that's the goal of my show, to get more people traveling around the world. It's all very easy to say that right now when we're in lockdown, but we're not going to be in lockdown forever, folks. And once those planes are flying, we're all going to be off tripping around the world again. So my guest today is an extraordinary young lady. She has been through a lot in her short life already, and she's a very determined person who chases her goals. And from what I understand, she achieves most of them. So we're going to introduce now to the Global Travel Channel podcast show, Sabrina Philipp. Welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your amazingly busy schedule to come and join me. I'm very honoured to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with your audience a little bit.
Now tell us, whereabouts in the wonderful world are you talking to me from today?
I'm currently in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Edinburgh, Scotland? Well, that's not too far from where the Loch Ness Monster is.
I saw the Loch Ness Monster just a week and a half ago, actually.
And what was he wearing?
She was looking lovely.
She was looking lovely.
I call her Nessie because we're really close friends like that.
And have you posted any? I didn't see anything on your Instagram page about Nessie.
I didn't post it on my Instagram. I did on my Facebook. My fear is that if too many people know where she is, they're going to capture her and put her into... So I like to let her go free, you know?
So you want to keep that one a little bit quiet, huh?
Yeah, it's like your favorite travel spot. You question, should I put this on Instagram? Should I not?
Yeah, that's true, actually. All these people around the world that are traveling go, oh, look at this amazing place. And then next season, it's packed out with millions of people.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. Now, on my show, I always offer my guests the opportunity to actually dedicate their show to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
Ooh. I will dedicate my show to my dad. He is German, and he's just always been someone who really inspires me with just how strong and intelligent he is. And I'm also just really inspired by how he's being so adaptable right now with coronavirus and everything going on. So he's a college professor teaching at home, and he also has two little boys, so he's teaching them as well.
Fantastic. Well, what's your dad's name?
Michael.
Michael. Well, that's a lovely dedication to your father, Michael. So, Michael, I'm very honoured to have your daughter on the show today, and I'm very pleased that she made this dedication to you. So I hope you sit down and listen to the show, Michael, and enjoy listening to your daughter, because I like to have a bit of fun with my guests. So I've got a couple of curly questions here that might just catch her out, but I'm sure she's prepared for most of it anyway. So tell us about podcasting. You've got your own podcast show, Sabrina. How long have you been doing that for?
I do. I have not been doing it for too long. It was a dream for about a year, and it was just a really big project with everything going on in my business, but I finally launched it last November, and now we're really consistently releasing episodes every Wednesday. So we actually have another one coming out today. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so we'll have another one coming soon.
Fantastic. And where can people find your podcast?
Anywhere you listen to podcasts, so Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or you can just go to sabrinaphilipp.com/podcasts, and all the episodes are there as well.
So there you go, everybody. Check on Sabrina's podcast show. I believe she does it with her better half as well, so there'll be lots of fun going on there, I'm sure. I've actually listened to a couple of the episodes, so I've got some inside gossip going on in this particular episode where we're going to speak to Sabrina. Now, podcast, what got you into podcast? Did you just see as an extension of what you were doing as far as your other business activities?
Yeah, so I think for me what was really appealing about podcasting was I could pre-record a lot of really valuable content for my audience and then release it out. I think the other thing also is just how people consume information is changing. And so a lot of our audience are people who are still in 9 to 5s or busy moms who are driving their kids to soccer practice or ballet practice, and we wanted to give them something that they could listen to in the car that would be really helpful and beneficial and fun for them to listen to.
Yeah, cool. Are you someone that listens to a lot of podcasts as well?
I had actually never listened to a podcast before I started my own.
That's interesting. So doing it yourself then got you into listening to other podcasts, is that right?
It did, yeah. And I think I'm glad that I hadn't listened to too many, just because I wasn't thinking about all of these other podcasts and how they were doing it and then how I should bring that into my own. It was really just fresh. And if I had no idea what podcasting was, how would I do it?
Yeah. That's a great way of doing things often, because and I had the same experience when I started my podcast, was I listened to too much white noise. I went out there and joined every podcast forum there is in the world, basically. Just drowned myself in all this white noise. And one day I just woke up and made the decision, okay, I'm just going to start this and go for it. And I'm thankful that I did. Otherwise, I'd probably still be lost in all that white noise.
Yeah. I think with all things in life, you just have to go for it at some point. You just have to rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested to talk to you today because of a whole lot of factors, and one of them is that I'm from Generation X. I just snuck into that generation, and you're from Generation Y. So we're going to I'm fascinated to see how you see the world through the business eyes of a person of your age today. And my audience, I know, is going to learn a lot about the perspectives that you bring into business as we're relating to it today. Well, maybe not today because the world's in a very different place, of course, but that's also an exciting opportunity, I'm sure. Now, let's go back, because there's lots of different aspects of your life journey that are fascinating. And when I was doing my research on you, I came across a number of things that were, I guess, really important for my audience to listen to. And I wanted to bring some of that soulfulness and spirituality of your journey into the show today, because that was a very important part of your journey. So could you spend a few minutes just telling us about your background at home and the family life and some of the struggles that you had there?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was growing up, I always felt very out of place with my family. And I think I most saw that when my former stepfather was leading the family. He was just very abusive and cruel. And I really just rebelled against that a lot until one day it almost felt like it just broke my spirit a little bit as a high schooler. And I just was drinking and not caring about school, and I was going to go off to a big school in Washington, D.C., but my mom was thinking, you know what, this is too big of a risk. You need to go to school home in Florida. I had 2 medical withdrawals when I was at college, which basically just means that you withdraw from the semester because they basically cancel your grades for medical reasons. But one semester that happened and the medical withdrawal hadn't kicked in yet. It wouldn't kick in for several months to come. But they basically said, you have to leave college now. Like you're kicked out. So I was able to go back later eventually. But I think that really just woke me up very quickly about what on earth am I doing to myself.
Did you feel like a black sheep at that stage, in terms of a black sheep in the world? Did you feel very alone?
Yeah, and it was funny just because I was in a sorority and I was in a lot of clubs and organizations, but I just never really felt like I fit in. And even now I look back at all of my sorority sisters posting on Instagram and I just think, I don't talk to any of you girls anymore. You're all perfectly lovely, but I just never really felt like I fit into that.
So rather than trying to connect, you kind of, I don't want to say you cut yourself off, but you just moved in a different direction.
Yeah, I think I definitely cut myself off, to be honest. And I even think back to just how I would, treat my younger sister or my mom and things like that, where I just wasn't really interested in their feelings because I didn't really think anyone was interested in mine. And I wasn't even interested in mine, because if you touch that pain, that's quite a lot to open up.
Now, we all live our different journeys in life, but when you're talking about things like this and there's a lot of pain associated with that in a lot of instances, what would you say to somebody out there today who's listening that is in a similar situation as you were at that age? What kind of advice would you throw out there to them?
I think that it's definitely true, the feeling that a lot of kids have where they think, well, once I'm out of the house, it will get so much better. And to an extent that is somewhat true, just because you feel like you have more control. But the problem is that wallowing in our pain is a bit of a habit, and it can be a hard one to shake. And you're not really going to be feeling better until you're able to confront that piece of yourself, where the question I really had to explore was, how much of this was done to me and how much of this did I do to myself? And if you can really own any of the pain that you're keeping onto yourself, then everything outside of you is going to suddenly feel so much easier. But it definitely does get better, of course. But I think just really, again, leaning into how much of this am I adding on and piling on? Because if you can even eliminate and chip away a little bit of that, then everything's going to start feeling so much easier, because you're going to start feeling in control again.
Now, interestingly, you were born actually in Germany and you went to the United States when you were about 4 years old. Is that right?
Yes, I was 4 years old and my sister Sophie was just under 2. She was 18 months.
Even though you were that young, that was quite, I guess that was quite a big transitional step for the family to go through that. So was there any part of that later on that you could feel a connection to, why did we leave Germany? What's my background and meaning back there? Was there any of that going on?
Yeah, so when we first moved to the United States, everyone spoke German at home. And then they very quickly realized that we weren't learning English. So they just stopped that entirely. And for my sister Sophie, it was very destabilizing. So she actually didn't speak for about a year, like anything. She just would not talk. But Germany and the United States, even just with Christmas traditions, are so different. So in Germany, for example, you don't have electric lights, you have candles, and you light them once, just on one day. You leave little shoes outside your door for St. Nicholas to put candies and presents into. So a lot of those traditions were just lost, and I no longer speak German. And so I think that was always really uncomfortable for me. Like, why did you stop speaking that to me? Because I didn't feel that connection, and I actually didn't get to go to Germany until I was maybe 23 years old. So I went once when I was 6, and I don't remember it too much. And then I went again when I was 23.
And how was it? How was it going at that age to, I guess, reconnect in a lot of ways to your very young, youthful self?
Yeah, I sadly didn't get to go to the city where I was born, but I went to a lot of areas nearby, and it was different because I was with my boyfriend at the time, now fiance, and so it was also unique just because even though I had been to Europe many times, I got to see someone experience very old town, traditional Bavarian Germany for the first time and see that with such wonder in their eyes. And that was also the first time he had ever seen snow. So it just had a very magical, special quality to it.
Whereabouts in Germany were you born?
I was born in Kassel, which is a little bit south, kind of on the border between East and West Germany. And then my dad is from Einbeck.
Okay, cool. So, strong feelings towards Germany nowadays? Is there a stronger connection for you, or is it just something that you've...
I recently got my passport renewed, my German passport renewed last year, which I hadn't had that since I was a baby. So I think that has definitely brought it closer, and also just, wanting to go spend more time in Germany, which every bit of travel is a bit on the pause at the moment, but coming soon.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about racism because it's something, unfortunately, that's appearing a little bit more around the world at the moment. And it was actually, I guess, racism that really launched you into the online presence on the world. Can you tell us how that happened at that particular time?
Yeah, so as I said a little bit earlier, I was in a sorority when I was in college, and my university had a very big student government system. And so this sounds silly, but if you hang in there with me, they actually have a $21 million annual budget, just the student government.
Wow.
So in Australian, that's probably, $28-30 million Australian. So you put a bunch of kids in charge of this, and that's actually quite substantial. And the idea of the student government budget is it'll fund clubs and organizations and student services and things like that. So basically, ever since the university racially integrated, the students who were more influential on campus were really struggling to keep Black students out because they didn't want them gaining any sort of influence in the student government channels and platforms. So what they started doing was they created a block system where they said we will vote as a block and we will make decisions as a block to basically keep them out. So just complete and total power of the majority. We're going to stand together to keep them out. And over the last, 50 years, what has happened is those sororities and different fraternities and influential groups on campus have morphed into 3 major voting blocks, and you kind of either go with one or the other based on what sorority or fraternity you're in. And every block has a block leader, so 3 people on campus who meet together and they barter over who gets what position. And historically, a position is going to go to a certain member of a sorority or fraternity. So, for example, there was one position on campus that would go ahead and contract speakers to come to campus and speak. And so they would typically pay the speaker anywhere from, $20,000 to $100,000. This would come out of student fees. But the part where it gets tricky is a lot of these positions that are essentially being given away are paid positions. So these children are actually receiving salaries from student fees, and it's not at all a fair election.
Wow. Okay.
So they also just have a control on the elections process. And what's happened, obviously, is since a lot of these sororities and fraternities are being favored, there was one position, the speaker position I mentioned, that over the course of 30 years, 26 of them had always had a member of that particular fraternity as the head. Is you start to discriminate against people of color, you start to discriminate against women, you start to discriminate against queer people, against Native and Indigenous folks. So it just created a really huge problem that left a lot of kids just feeling like, why even bother getting involved? And so I was actually quite high up in that system just by the nature of having been in the sorority that I was. I was going to be one of these block leaders. And so it was my senior year. It was maybe 2 months before I was going to leave. And I decided that I was going to make a video basically talking about all of this, because anyone else who had tried before was kind of laughed off like, well, what do you know? You're just angry because you're not Greek, because you're not in a sorority, or you're not in a fraternity. Like, no one listened to them. But I was quite influential on campus and in the system, so it caused a bit of an uproar when I made the video. And very quickly I was in a lot of news organizations like Cosmopolitan and The Independent and things like that, and it just completely threw my world upside down with how big it got.
So that more or less went viral immediately, did it?
It did, yeah. And I think that we also planned for it a little bit. We were quite strategic with it. So what I did not expect was the international media, but what I wanted was other students to pick up on this, because I knew that this was not a unique problem to our school. This is very true for a lot of Southern universities. So what I did was I just started to assemble different kids in different schools who were all going to push the video at the same time, and also just anyone that I knew at any school who worked at the school newspaper to write an article about it that would be published the day that it went live. So there was definitely some strategic planning, but I don't think we expected it to get as big as it did.
Are we allowed to name the school? What school were you at?
Yes, University of Florida.
University of Florida, okay. So when that happened and that video went viral, what was your other than the first reaction, which was surprise, what else kind of came to light for you? Did you see an opportunity as a result of that?
Opportunity was not immediately present. I think that it was just a lot of mixed emotions, because I was condemning something that I'd been a part of for a few years, and I had tried to make changes on the inside and just realized I could never do that. And I was feeling very disgruntled and thinking, well, I'm about to leave here and it's just going to keep being the same. It's going to continue. And I just had this feeling of, I don't know anyone else who's brave enough to do this, or crazy enough, anyone who's willing to do this. But it was just a lot of mixed emotions, and obviously just seeing who really is your friend and who isn't, because I did have a lot of my Greek friends who are supporting me and they're with me. It's just that when people feel like a change can't be made, they're unlikely to say anything publicly a lot of times.
What did it do to your self-worth at that time? Where were you in your own personal trajectory of, self-confidence and belief? Was it something that gave you a lot more self-belief by getting the responses that you did?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned a little bit earlier, I'd been kicked out of college at one point and I had to spend, 6 or 9 months away doing something else. And so what I did was I went to an ashram in the Bahamas and I learned how to become a yoga teacher and a yoga philosophy teacher, and I joined their staff. And I think that
Mm.
really just settled me as an individual and it gave me a lot of inner peace. So
Mm.
thankfully, by the time the video rolled around, I was no longer, struggling with depression or anything like that. So I think for the most part, I was able to keep my center, but there was definitely a lot of highs and lows. Um, and I think it was just this feeling of if I can be under this much fire, I can survive anything.
What were you studying at school?
Political science and religion.
So, what was the end game goal at that stage?
At that stage, I was thinking maybe I'll go be a lawyer or I'll get a PhD. I was more interested in getting a PhD in international relations at that point.
Hmm.
And it was just overwhelming because I remember at the time one of my professors was saying you need to stay an extra year and do a minor in statistics, because political science has changed so much and it's all about statistics and data.
Mm.
And there's all these old professors who don't know how to do that. So they want to bring in kids who do to help them with their research. And I just was like, I need a little bit of a break and then I'll make a decision because I was so passionate about many different things.
Mm. Did you enjoy studying?
I did, yeah. I don't think I enjoy taking boring classes. And by that, I mean, if I can read this in a book and you're not actually going to challenge me, I don't want to come to class. So I don't enjoy the structure of class, but I like professors that I like learning and having discussions. So I always enjoyed my higher level classes.
Mm. Do you come from an academic family?
Yes, very academic. My grandfather was a professor at Yale.
Okay, so you had some very good role models.
Yes, definitely. All a very educated family. Very much we value that.
Now, you're the first person I've spoken to on my show, and I've had 117 guests before you. That you're the only one that's been to the Bahamas to an ashram. So tell us about how that decision was made.
Well, my mom made that decision for me. So we were kind of looking around at each other, sitting at the kitchen table, thinking, well, what do we do now? And so she had been to this ashram for a New Year's Eve for a few days, a few years back. And she was like, you'll go there. It'll be great. Um, and so I lived in a tent for 6 months. And the first month I did yoga teacher training and I was super resistant to it. And I thought all of these people are absolutely crazy. They're out of their mind because everyone wears white pants and yellow t-shirts and, lots of shaved heads and stuff for the men, not the women, obviously. And
Mm.
I was just like, that like this is literally a cult, like you cannot do this is child endangerment. And she was just like, I love you so much, hangs up the phone. And I was very resistant to it for a long time. And I was just hiding behind how smart I was. I was like, I'm not even going to listen to the classes. I'm going to buy a book from the bookstore and just read that.
Right.
I was just like, I don't even need this. And then something just clicked in me one day and I was like, I am so silly. I have done all of this to myself.
Yeah. So what was it? Was there an epiphany? Can you relate to the particular thing that made the switch go on for you?
Yeah, I think for me it was just this click because the thing about that particular program is that the way that the program came to be is the founder basically believes that if you can have basically this like little army of yoga teachers who are all spiritually peaceful inside themselves, they will go spread that peace to others.
Mm.
And so to get to that place, you obviously have to come against a lot of demons and walls. So they're really trying to get in your face and confront your ego and break you down. It always felt very responsible to me, just for anyone who's nervous. I never saw anything like too aggressive or too inappropriate, but it's definitely confronting. And so every
Mm.
day we would sit at lunch and we would look and see who's cried today. And so it was like week 3, week 2, and I still hadn't cried. And everyone's like, today's going to be the day. Today's going to be the day. And I was like, nope, nope, nope. Um, and then one of my teachers got in my face and he was just like, you have the biggest ego I've ever seen. And
Wow.
I was just like, oh my gosh, because I realized that he was 100% right because I was just hiding behind that to keep space and distance from all these other people.
How did you feel when he said that to you?
Just very like he had seen through my skull and like straight into me.
Mm.
It was just I felt very transparent. And
Is that the first time in your life that you'd felt that way?
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember even now since that moment. I can't remember ever feeling that way.
And then what happened after there? Was there an immediate change in not only attitude, obviously, but also aptitude in the way you went about the whole program?
Yeah, so I think after that, it was just at first this who does he think he is? He doesn't know anything. He's so wrong. And then it was
Yeah.
just sitting with what he said and ruminating on it and thinking about it and realizing, you know what? He is absolutely right. And why is this? How did this come about? And then you kind of go through the list of all the people you want to blame. My mom did this, my dad did this, my stepdad did that. You know, my college sucks. The sorority girls are so mean. And it's like, well, is that true? Or what have I contributed to the situation? Because at that point, I was, I think 20 years old at that point. I think I turned 21 at the ashram. Or maybe, no, I was 19 when I was at the ashram. I turned 20 at the ashram. So, you know, I was 19 at that point. I had been out of college for a year. I had been out of my home for a year and a half living on my own. So there was no real reason for me to keep blaming everyone else. And so I think that there's a fine balance because obviously we want to be mindful of people's pain and trauma. But in my case, I think that I was just really attached to making everyone else wrong instead of myself.
So how did you see your world evolving after you left the Bahamas and after that particular experience?
Well, at first it was very much a culture shock just because at the ashram, you know, like I said, everyone wears white pants, yellow t-shirts. Everyone has 2 vegetarian meals a day, a brunch and a dinner. It's very rigorous and structured in terms of meditation twice a day, yoga twice a day. So when I left and I went back to the real world, I just had no idea what was going on. And I remember I would kind of dress the way that I did in the ashram for a while after. And so my mom and my sister staged an intervention. They're like, we have to throw away your goat herder shoes. And I like these shoes. Thank you very much. You know, Chacos are not goat herder shoes. They're actually great for travel for anyone listening.
Yeah, right.
So it was just kind of a reintegration process, I think. And then also just learning to balance everything I had learned with also, I think, just the real world.
So you were there for 6 months. Did you come out with an appetite to do more of that internal searching and spirituality, or was it enough for you to then move on to your next chapter in life?
Definitely, I was very interested to do more, and I think that we all can relate to spirituality in different ways. For some of us, we really like the ritual. For others, we really like the service to our community. For myself, I was really intrigued by the intellectual side of it. So I was going to every lecture I could, reading every book I could, and then just relating it to everything I'd been learning back in college. And so when I did go back to school, that's when I started taking more religion classes. So for me, I just really wanted to learn more about it because that's how I could relate to it emotionally. First, I had to learn and then download it.
So where were you on the trajectory of life, job, career, and all that sort of thing at that stage?
At that stage, I just had, 2 more years of university to go through. And I was thinking, do I want to go the international studies route or do I want to go the religion route? And not exactly sure, but just thinking I might want to be a professor or something like that. I had mostly dropped the lawyer thing by that point.
So you decided then to go where next? Where was home at that stage?
Well, I was living in Gainesville, which is where the University of Florida was. And then when I finished, I still had a few more classes to finish up online, but I didn't need to be on campus anymore. And I had decided that I was going to move to Bali and try my hand at just traveling the world for a bit, and hoping that along the way I could figure out what it was that I really, truly wanted.
Why was Bali the choice for you? Was it also linked to the spirituality side of things?
So when I was discussing with my mom, where should I go during that semester that I was kicked out, we had looked at a program in Bali to teach English, so it had been on my mind, just as an option. And then also my mom was a yoga teacher. I was a yoga teacher. My sister was a yoga teacher. And there's a huge yoga community in Bali. And it's just very safe for women. And I was young at that point. I was 22. And I'd never been that far by myself. I'd been to Europe by myself, but that was about it. So it just seemed like a good starting point, and I thought that I would go there. And then, Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam, I thought that I would hop around, but I never left.
So you went to Bali. What age were you then?
22.
22. Okay. So how was it when you first arrived? Did you kind of feel comfortable and slot in straight away, or was there a bit of a adjustment period?
I think that there was a little bit of an adjustment period, but I had done a lot of research, and I also just kind of kicked into ashram mode, and I had pulled out all my old ashram clothes. So I was just like, I've got this. I can do this. I lived in a tent. I can handle Bali. And I had set it up that the first 2 weeks that I was there, I was in a little homestay right next to the big yoga studio in Bali, the yoga barn in Ubud. So that was nice just because I could, wake up and then go over, have some breakfast there, maybe do a yoga class, and then just do some research on villas that I wanted to rent.
So what was the vision that you kind of had in your head of what was going to happen to you while you were in Bali? And did you have any preconceived ideas on how long you'd be there for?
I thought that I might be there for 2 months or something. I didn't think I would be there long. At the time, just work-wise, I was thinking, let me be a virtual assistant online. Let me be a travel blogger, just something to make a little bit of money, maybe $1,000 a month so that I can travel around Southeast Asia.
And is that what you started doing?
Yeah, so I didn't ever get into the travel blogging, but I did, buy a domain and make a logo. So it was going to be yogimeetsworld.com. I still have all the branding. It was amazing, like $20 on Etsy, so worth it.
Right.
And yeah, I started off doing just virtual assistant tasks. So I remember one of my first jobs was $12 an hour to write Instagram captions.
There's a lot of people your age that go to Bali. There's a lot of that entrepreneur spirit there. There's a lot of that yoga spirit, spirituality spirit, if I can use that as a saying. How did you find that when you first got there? Was it something that you easily got in and collaborated on?
So I'm definitely an introvert. So I did sign up eventually for a co-working membership at Ubud, which is a big co-working space there. But I just felt really overwhelmed being around all these people. And also it's difficult for me personally to focus in co-working spaces. I prefer to be in my own office space. So I was there for a little bit and I saw a lot of entrepreneurs for sure, but they were all just so much older than me. So I didn't really try to talk to anyone. And the spirituality piece, I think definitely that is so huge in Bali. There are these researchers who guess that Balinese women spend half their life preparing for a ceremony, being in ceremony, and then taking down and cleaning up after a ceremony.
Wow.
Half their waking hours, yeah.
So when you arrived in Bali to start your new life, you didn't have a very large budget, did you?
No, I had about $800 with me. My parents thought that I had 3,000 or 4,000, but I fibbed them a little bit and didn't tell them the truth because I didn't want them to freak out or not let me go.
Do they know the truth
Now
yet?
they know. Now they know.
So you haven't kept it from them all those years?
No, they found out eventually.
So Bali and your presence in Bali really started to change a lot of things in your life too, didn't it? Because there was a man came on the scene as well.
He sure did. So after about a year living in Bali, I met Paul, or as Australians say, Paul. His dad always makes fun of me for that. So Paul, and I met in Ubud. So he was working remotely for a company at the time, and he decided to go to Bali for 5 weeks just to see what it was like to work and travel and if that's something he wanted to do long term. And about 2 weeks into his trip, 2.5 weeks into his trip, we met at a co-working space, funnily enough. So there was a hotel right next to my house that had a cafe, and one of their top floors was a co-working space. So that's where the cafe was, and I was just there and we met that way.
Wow, was it love at first sight?
No. So Yeah, yes and no. So I think that when we actually went on our first date, the connection was there, but I was just so in my head of he's nothing like I thought I would be attracted to. So Paul very much looks like an athlete. Like he played rugby, he played football, like everything. Like he's just so athletic and nice and like Australian charm. They're so funny. They're so warm. And I was just over here and I was like, I need a really tall, skinny, smart guy. And then here's just this big, like, Steve Irwin walks into my life, and I was like, there's no way this is my thing. Also, Paul says crikey 8 times a day.
Crikey, 8 times a day. Oh, he's not real Aussie. Then he'd say it 12 times a day if he was
But
a real
he says
Australian.
it so many times. I go to Australia, and I'm like, no one is saying crikey, and all of his family is laughing, and they're like, no, Paul is literally the only one who does that. So he's literally Steve Irwin. And so I think in my head, I was just like, there's no way this was going to work. But connection wise, it was definitely there. Our first date was 8 hours. Could not stop talking.
Mm. Wow, must have been some energy going
Yeah.
on there. Now, today you help entrepreneurs build intentional, manageable, and profitable online business. Explain that to my
Yes.
listeners.
So I got started in online business by moving to Bali, and I first was doing some virtual assistant work, and then I moved into social media management, and I scaled up my social media agency, and all of my clients were asking me for business consulting just because they were like, how are you growing your business so quickly? So what I did was I made the shift over. But what I knew that I needed was my own approach to business because I didn't want to be teaching what everyone else was. And so I thought, let me look at 20, 30, 50 successful businesses and people who are actually happy in their business. What's true here? And so what I found was, the people who actually love to run their businesses and are successful doing it are very intentional. They're not building businesses that don't match their lifestyle. If you do want to travel the world and you have a business that requires you to be glued to your phone 18 hours a day, that's going to be really tough with time zones. Or let's say you go somewhere where the cell reception's not that good. That's going to be really, really difficult.
So when we're talking about authenticity, really, aren't we? We're talking about matching your own internal purpose with what you do, really.
Definitely. And I think beyond that, also just from a strategic standpoint, a lot of times people are making decisions in business and they're taking action just for the sake of taking action, but they don't actually know why they're doing it. So, they go off and they create a new program or they go hire someone, but there's no intention behind it. There's no purpose. They just think they need to do it, or they're just getting busy, or they're throwing spaghetti at the wall hoping something sticks. But you really need to have a purpose behind what you're doing because if you don't know where you're throwing, you're not going to. If you don't know where you're aiming, you're not going to land anywhere.
So let's go back to where you were providing your clients, and I'm assuming your clients were all over the world when you started your social media marketing business. How did that go for you at a personal level when you had to then take on a different role and become, I guess, a lot less of an introvert because you were putting yourself into a new dynamic? How did that change for you personally? Was it easy for you to do that?
I think so. For me, it's really easy to connect with people and um, have conversations and deliver business services. I think I just get very overwhelmed in massive crowds. Like if you drop me into Venice in the middle of summer, that is just going to be horrifying for me. But dealing one-on-one or even with clients, I think that feels fine. I led an event last year and we had 140 people there, and I was on stage all day for 3 days, and that was fine for sure. I think that it also just helps when it's an area of expertise of mine. If you asked me to go sing a song, that might be a little bit different. If you asked me to talk about business, I feel pretty comfortable. But I think that intention piece also came up just because when I first got started, I would take calls with clients at 2 in the morning just because I didn't know how to set boundaries. And I just was, going to do whatever it took to make it work, but I just wasn't being intentional. So I even just think back to my own experiences getting started and why, authenticity, as you put it, or intentionality matters so much.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening today who is in a similar situation? They're about to launch themselves into this online business game, and they've done all their research. They're probably like I was in the podcasting world with all this white noise going on around them, because there's a proliferation of business coaches out there today. In fact, the world's agate with them. So how did you differentiate yourself in that space? Or how are you differentiating yourself in that space?
Definitely. So I think that there are two obvious ways that any of us can differentiate ourselves, and one of them is definitely our story. So for me, I was the young business coach over in Bali, and I was scaling quite quickly. And then I think another way is just with our framework and our methodology and what it is that we're actually teaching. So for me, that was my IMP framework, so intentional, manageable, profitable. Because the thing is, if you sell people on your process, you will sell them on your product. And since I was the only one teaching that framework, if they wanted to learn more about it, they had to come into my programs. And I think also the benefit of leading with personal branding or methodology is you're going to attract people who are interested in that specifically, so they are more likely to be ideal clients or really loyal followers and customers.
Hence the whole marketing behind Sabrina Philipp International, is that right? It's a focus on the backstory of yourself, as you just mentioned.
Definitely. I lived in Bali for 3 years, and just recently, I guess now it's been 9 months, but last June, Paul and I finally left to get traveling around the world and be in Europe. But we definitely wanted to keep that global feel to the brand, just because if you think about the deeper why for a lot of our clients, they want that freedom to go travel the world. Now, that's not true for everyone. Some people just want freedom to be able to pick their kids up from school at 2 p.m. But that freedom piece, we really wanted to make sure that was prominent.
Yeah. So we've left Paul behind a little bit in the story. So let's catch up with him after the first date. What happened when, as far as, the business evolution went in that first 12 months? Because you're being very humble here today. You landed with $800, and I hear that you actually hit $1 million in the first year of actually setting this business up. Is that correct?
We did, yeah. And now it's a multiple 7-figure business. It's been quite the journey. But yeah, so when Paul and I first met after that first date, we, were dating a bit for a few more weeks, and then he had to go back to Australia, and he was going to be gone for a while, and he said, I have to go back for 6 weeks, but I will come back for you. And I was like, sure, buddy. But he did. He came back, and we, spoke on Skype every day for hours and hours, and then he came back. And when he did come back, I was about to be featured in Forbes. The night that he landed, an article was going to go out about me on Forbes.com. And I remember, we saw each other, we got into the room and we just opened up our laptops, ready for this thing to go live. And in the first 24 hours, it had 100,000 views. And so our relationship and my business were really tied together quite early on. And it was just a huge celebration and milestone for us.
So it's really been a journey together, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, the first time he was in Bali, and we would, go have coffee dates and things like that. We would be, working next to each other, and I was building my website next to him.
Did you get a sense of feeling that it's a lot nicer to share the spoils of your hard work with somebody as in having your partner there involved as well?
I definitely think that for sure. And I think there's definitely, some tips we can discuss to how to navigate that relationship. But, for me, my business was never about the money. It was about the experience and the freedom and the travel. And so that is what I really wanted to share with someone. So having someone along for that just made it all so much sweeter.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that a little bit later. I've got some questions around that, because I think in terms of there's probably people listening today who are in that situation as a partnership. They may be husband and wife, they may be just partners in life who are also going down that track. So we will bring that up. But I do want to go back to one of your goals, or one of your many goals, which is to empower women through entrepreneurship. So why have you chosen specifically to, I guess, aid women in this journey as well?
Yeah, so I've definitely worked with men, and we have men on the team, we have men as clients. But what I've found over the years is that, 98% of our clients are women. So I think it just made sense to niche down. I think the other thing also for me was I had always just been really involved with women's issues and women's advocacy growing up. And one of the lessons I learned all early on was not every flag is yours to carry. I think that sometimes we should be quiet supporters of issues while letting the people actually affected be the ones to lead that. And so for me, picking up the flag for women's issues, I think just really made sense. especially just because a lot of the people who are so prominent in the online business space are men. And there's just a lot of things that I fundamentally disagree with that they teach. And I think it's very much this kind of aggressive bro marketing that does exclude women, and is just very much about hustle, hustle, hustle. And it doesn't take into account, wanting to have children or raising a family or the need for balance. And I think that even just myself, I'm very much a very balanced person and, very feminine. And the idea that I would work 18 hours a day is just crazy. And also, it's not needed. And I think it's just bad business. You look at Richard Branson, he looks like he's having a great old time.
Yeah, exactly. That's something I wanted to ask you, actually, when you talk about women and their life goals today, particularly women of your age. Is it true to say that women of your age are trying to have what I classify as the 3 Fs, fame, fortune, and family? Is that a goal in terms of young women these days?
I mean, I can't speak for all women, obviously, but I think that for me, the fame piece is actually the most uncomfortable piece, just because as someone who is introverted, the social media piece can be very difficult for me at times because, we have 25,000 people on our email list and over 100,000 people across our social platforms. And so there's just all these messages all day long. And just also you kind of realize along the way that, some people just want to be associated with you because of who you are, but they don't actually care about like what you are, what you care about, and what's true for you. So I think that piece has been tough. But for me, I think fortune and family for sure.
I've watched a lot of your videos, and I must say that, and I've read a lot of the comments on those videos, and I would say a very large percentage of your audience is expressing their gratitude to you, that how natural and authentic you are. And I think that's something that comes across again in the videos I've watched, that you really seem to be the real deal, if I can call it that. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that there's a lot of fake people out there. I'm just saying that, when you connect with someone that level, you feel more comfortable with them, and I think you have a great audience that appreciates that of you.
Thank you. When I was in high school, my senior quote was, "If nothing else, I am myself. That's all I have to give." It's from a song, and I think that it just guides me in a lot of ways, because why would you want to be anyone other than yourself? And again, just from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense because people can sniff out inauthenticity from a mile away, and that's just not going to last. Building a brand on someone other than yourself is not sustainable.
So given the journey you've been on with your self-love and self-respect and the work that you've put into yourself, which transpires through many years, when you see young women coming into your network and they might be struggling in that area, are you giving them advice in terms of how to go about finding that self-love? Because you do demonstrate that, sort out your own problems first, basically, before you start trying to grow a business. Because if you don't get yourself sorted out, then you're not going to be successful. Is that fair to say that?
I definitely agree with that completely. And yes, I joke a lot that I'm more life coach than business coach. Just because, and relationship coach as well, but it's so fundamental to success in business to have, a strong mindset and a strong sense of self and a level of resilience. And also just, I think that over the years, there's been this story that, you are your business. And I don't personally agree with that, because my self-worth is priceless. My products have a price tag. My business has a value associated with it. And, if my business goes, that's fine. But if Paul goes, that's a problem, right? If I lose half my clients tomorrow, I'll bounce back. But if I lose my family, I can't say that I'll just bounce back. So I think that for me, it's really just about perspective and understanding that, we love our businesses and they can be an extension of what's important to us, but they are not us. And I think that's where it trips people up a lot. If you can kind of have those two separate energies of get yourself right, respect your business, I think that also just takes a lot of the really risky emotion out of it. Because if you make super emotional decisions in your business, those aren't always going to be the most logical or most profitable decisions you can make.
What do you say to people about keeping their ego in check when growing a business?
I think that the thing about business is it's not about how you look in the short term. It's about how your business feels in the long term. And, what is the long-term game plan? What's the run rate here? So I think just really stay humble and stay a student and keep trying to learn and, stay adaptable. And I think also the other thing is anytime we're in our ego, we're very much about me. And for your business to succeed, you always need to be making it about the people that you serve. And I think also once you really start to scale, about your team. So for me, I can never be bigger than my team. I need to make sure that they're right there alongside me and that they can really connect with me. So I think just remember that you can't go it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the things that you've learnt yourself that have been some of the toughest learning curves through this journey so far?
Yeah, I think definitely not taking things personally has been a big one, and just realizing, especially when it comes to money, that is always going to be a very highly emotional conversation for other people, and they're projecting that onto you. So all of us are going to have this come up at some point where, we had a great happy customer or client suddenly start, spewing fire and daggers at us, telling us how horrible we are. And you look a little deeper and you realize it's because they can no longer afford your services. And so I think just learn. And for me, I always took that so personally because I was thinking that I did something wrong, and it's realizing, obviously we all have room to improve in our businesses, but a lot of times it's also just they're no longer a fit for your program, and they're just acting out in whatever way is making their inner self feel good right now. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I think that's also just true as well with dealing with even just team members, because people are going to act out from their insecurity and their fear and their ego and their this, and just really looking at what's actually true here has been a big learning curve for me in anything. Just what's the truth here? Always looking for that. And I think just not getting distracted by what everyone else is doing, because it's easy to do that, just to look around and see what everyone else is doing. But for me, I'm very much committed to my long-term strategy and my long-term vision. And I think that is why I'm able to grow so quickly, because I'm not getting distracted by what everyone else is doing.
So keep that white noise out as much as possible.
Yeah, just don't even look at it. I'm almost never on my phone. I lose my phone like 18 times a day, and it drives Paul crazy. And I think that's a good thing, because I'm not on social media constantly looking at everyone else.
So in terms of that relationship with social media, from what I'm hearing is that, you'd rather not even be involved in it if you could, but you have to because it's part of your stream. So how do you manage that delicately? Because social media is such an abrupt thing at times. So is it something that you don't manage personally yourself too much these days, or how do you get around it?
So I definitely have help managing it with members of my team, but what has helped for me is just really streamlining the number of people that I follow. So, even on Facebook, I think that's where people tend to follow the most. They might have 3,000, 4,000 friends. And I had about 4,600 friends, and I've been slowly cutting that down to something in the 3,000s, where if I just see someone and it's like, well, I haven't spoken with you in 10 years, unfriend, wish you well. I just try to really cut down who I'm following on social media, so that if something does pop into my feed, it's really positive, or it's someone I do want to see what they're up to.
Quality over quantity.
Definitely quality over quantity. And then, inquiries wise, if we have cold leads, cold inquiries come in, my team might be the first one to manage that. But then if it's my clients, I always have them as like the C first on my social, because I want to interact with them and engage with them. So I think it's just about managing how you spend your time on social media. Something that I like to do is maybe just do 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, and just leave it for the rest of the day so that it's contained.
So as a Generation Y person, entrepreneur, I'll say, not person, as a Generation Y entrepreneur, have there been things that you've looked at how baby boomers and Generation X have managed businesses in the past and kind of learnt lessons of not how to do it and do things in a different way? Or have you just completely ignored what's gone on in history and just paving your own way?
Yeah, so I think that I have looked at older businesses for sure. And I think that the mistake would be to look at where their business is right now, but really just to see where has their business been in the last 20 years. And so what we find is that a lot of businesses will die out over time, what I believe mostly to be because they're not adaptable to changing times, because the world is changing so quickly. So whether that's they're not moving online enough, or they're not staying relevant with their marketing, or they don't know what their customers actually want, I just think that adaptability is the big piece. But I think that I definitely am inspired by a lot of these larger businesses because I never had corporate experience. I never had a corporate job. So for me, it's been really nice just to look and see, how companies are operating. And there's so many, new SaaS companies these days who are working entirely remotely, or companies like Patagonia that are very much about who they're serving first and their missions first, that I think I'm really inspired by.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also want to applaud you for your strategy in terms of keeping away from the white noise as much as possible and trailblazing, because I think there's so many people out there, and I've had a lot of them on the show who have been travel bloggers and all the rest of it, that have struggled because of their intense connection to what everybody else is doing and being drowned by that. And I think it takes so much energy to overcome that, and it's no different in the podcast world. If you spend all your day looking at other people's podcasts and going, oh, I don't have that many downloads, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing that, you'll never get your brand to where you want it to be. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. And I think that also the danger in watching what everyone else is doing is you'll become like everyone else and you just won't stand out.
Yeah. Hey, I've got a kind of a funny question to ask you here, so don't take it too personally, but you do say on your website, I will stop selling when Jeff Bezos does. I'm interested to know why he's the benchmark and not someone like the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, so what I have found is that in serving women entrepreneurs, they have their own set of challenges. And one of them a lot is just this feeling of, I have to be nice and I have to do the nice thing. And so there's this big conversation right now having with women entrepreneurs saying, well, we shouldn't be selling right now. It's not right with everything that's going on in the coronavirus. And, Jeff Bezos just hired 100,000 people. And I don't think he's worried about his money mindset or doing the nice thing. I think he's, collecting his paycheck and obviously doing a massive service to the world. People need Amazon services right now. And for me, selling is an act of service. I'm helping people get more of what they want, right? I'm not here to take people's money from them and leave them with nothing. I'm here to help make their lives better. So, if Jeff Bezos isn't going to stop selling, why should I? Is it because I'm a woman? And I think that's the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah, that makes sense. Look, I'm really interested to know, are you at a stage now where you're being more, let's say, picky or fussy about the people that you work with, as far as connections and making sure that the value systems align? Is that important to you?
I think definitely, for sure. Who the internet lives forever at this point, and who you're associated with will also live forever. So I think it's just important to really work with people that you would be proud to stand by 5 years from now. Yeah,
good point. Now, I'm really interested to know, and I ask this question a lot to the travel bloggers and people that I have on the show. I say, what's your end game? What's your exit strategy? What is it about? Is it about the money? Is it about traveling the world? Is it about being as clever as you can and building a business? What's your end game with all of this?
I think my business stopped being about me a long time ago, in the sense that I definitely benefit from the freedom and the finances and the travel, but we've helped thousands of women at this point start their businesses, and I don't have an end game or an exit strategy planned. I don't see myself selling, the company, especially not since it's so personal brand driven, but we're gearing up to have 3 or 4 live events a year, and we've hired lots of support coaches, and we're training them in our methods and having them come underneath us, and just it's not about me anymore. It's about them. So there's no exit strategy.
So in some ways, I'm actually hearing that it's kind of almost a social enterprise.
I think so. I mean, we definitely have a charitable component. We definitely donate to nonprofits that promote education. We have one in Bali that we support, education for children in Bali, and then also just, young girls around the world. And I think eventually it would be nice to have more of our own foundation aspect to it, just helping, women start their own businesses, whether that's through education or microloans. But I think for now, I'm just going to keep doing what I can to help as many women as I can start businesses, because I think the world is a better place with money in the hands of women.
Yeah, just to clarify that, that's what I meant in terms of social entrepreneurship. I wasn't relating directly to the charity model, because I think if I'm sitting here listening and looking at what your business is doing today, is you're actually helping women and men starting their own business, and then through that they're able to make a profit and do things in their life to make a difference as well. So I see that as a social entrepreneurship value that you're giving to society, without a doubt.
I understand. I think that for me, it's maybe a little bit difficult to take that term on, just because I think about how big the business is, and I'm like, oh no, we should be more frugal. We should be like Tom's. We can't be this luxurious. But yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I think that we do have a big social mission. I want to get it beyond the West, and I think right now it's very, United States and European, and I want to take it more global.
Especially when you got an Aussie partner.
I know.
So, where would you be today if you weren't, if that video about racism at the university didn't go out? What do you think you'd be doing?
I think I would be a lawyer, probably. I think that I would be a lawyer, or I would be working on a political campaign somewhere on Capitol Hill in the U.S. in Washington, D.C. I think that I would have gone that route. I think that that video was important just because it kind of burned down any image I had of what my life is supposed to look like. And just realizing that if you can go through that, you can go through anything. And that permission slip to take the risk is what allowed me to move to Bali.
Are you somebody that looks back at that period of your life now and goes, that's what destiny had in hand for me? That's what I was meant to be doing?
Definitely. And I look back at every moment, and I know that it had to happen that way. And I think that that's a mindset that you can choose whether or not you want to tap into. But for me, it really serves me because it just reminds me that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. So instead of fighting the current moment, how can I move through it gracefully to get to the other side of this?
Yeah. So I'm interested to know, in regards to online business entrepreneurs, travel bloggers, influencers, whatever you want to label all these different groups, is there a burnout factor involved in this? Do you get sick and tired of traveling around the world? I've listened to you in some of your more recent videos, and you're both talking about, having a base camp, sitting down a little bit longer in places and establishing yourselves rather than, hopping on a plane all the time and going off to somewhere else.
Yeah, so we tried the hopping around thing, where we were, leaving a city every 5 or 6 days, and it was just very exhausting as a couple, but also just as business owners, because Paul also has his own independent business as well. So it's just a lot, I think, to manage that. And for me, it was tough because I would stay inside working. And then by the time I'm off to the next place, I feel like I hadn't seen the last one. So for us, having a base, I think, just feels a little bit nicer. And I think it makes sense with the stage we are in our lives, having just gotten engaged and wanting to nest a little bit.
Yeah, so you're in Scotland today. What's the short to medium term plan once we're all allowed to travel again? Are you got a destination where you're going to be off to?
I think the first stop will be the United States or Australia, just because we got engaged 2 months ago and we haven't been able to celebrate with our families yet because of coronavirus, and our engagement party got canceled and things like that. So as soon as we can travel, we want to go see the family. But we'll be in Scotland, I think, for at least another 2 or 3 months, just based off our predictions of everything we've been reading.
You might get to see some sunshine.
I know.
Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, I've got some just some quick fire fun questions to finish up with today. So I'm interested to know what your favorite snack food is when you're traveling.
I'm not a huge snacker, actually. Can I say a wine? Is that allowed? Is wine a snack food?
Well, I tell you what, I've watched a video of 2 people cooking some spaghetti meatballs, and there was a particular bottle of wine that got quite a hard time, actually, I think, in that video. And you announced to the world on that video that was your favourite wine, so why don't you tell us what that one was?
Brunello di Montalcino. I actually just ordered a case of it yesterday because, if you're going to have a coronavirus party, you need to have some good wine with you.
Okay, so that's we won't call that your go-to travel snack, but it's something you enjoy having. Okay. What about a bucket list destination in the world that you haven't been to yet?
The pyramids in Egypt. I want to do a Nile River cruise.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, beautiful. Have you been up to the Daintree Forest and that up in North Queensland?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay. So you've seen some of the nicer parts of Australia. My next question, in what country did you have your most scariest moment?
Probably Italy. It was when I was a teenager. I was there doing study abroad in Morocco, and we hopped over to Italy, and we were in this bar with the owner after it had closed, and he was talking to my friend, and me and my other friend were sitting, and we were just talking and chatting, and then he was just really aggressive and yelling at us because I guess he was mad at the friend or something when we were...
Fair enough. And I think I know the answer to the next question, but I'll throw it out there anyway. In what country did you have your most memorable moment?
Ooh. I guess Paris, because I got engaged there, so I think that was very special. But it's hard to say when you've just been all around the world every year, you know?
There's so many places, yeah. So, last one. If you could change the world today, what would you do?
I would replace Donald Trump as president of the United States.
Okay, there's a very strong statement to finish up with. Sabrina, I have one other funny question I wanted to ask you actually before you go today, and that is, do you get sick and tired of people spelling your family name incorrectly?
I do.
Because I was looking at it when I first came across you, and I thought, I bet you she has the same problem I have, because we've got names that are not too dissimilar, and it's one of those things that it's either one L or two P's or whatever, and people always muck it up.
Not Phillips, it's Philip, but it's going to be the same thing when I get married, because Paul's last name is Thompson, but no P, Thomson.
Oh, you're gonna have the same problem, yeah.
Even now our team members will spell his name with a P, and I'm like, no.
There you go. It's going to be a lifelong issue. Anyway, I wanted to ask you that because I thought that you probably would have the same experience with me with your name. Listen, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on the show today. We've rushed through our time. I could have spent another hour chatting to you about all sorts of stuff, but I want to thank you very much for taking your time out in beautiful Scotland this morning to talk to me on the Global Travel Channel podcast show. And please come back anytime you want, because we'd love to have a chat, and I'm sure we'll get lots of amazing feedback from my audience on this conversation. I bet you they got lots of questions for you as well that they'd like me to ask you in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, and we will speak again soon. Sabrina Philipp, thank you for being on my show.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the incredible Sabrina Philipp, Philipp, speaking to me today from beautiful Scotland, as we're all sitting at home. And what an incredible young lady who has taken an incredible life journey already, and obviously turned that into some wonderful success. But as you would have heard, it's not all about making money, it's about being true to yourself, and maybe that's motivated and inspired a lot of us out there today to continue along the road on what makes us happy in life. Now, if you're looking for more happiness from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, head on over to the website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You'll find 117 other podcast episodes there for you to listen to. So if you're after some education, if you're after some inspiration, if you're after some motivation at this time of your life, well, this is a great place to go and find it. I've had some extraordinary guests on my show, and Sabrina was another one today. Okay, well, that's it until the next time. I'm going to try and increase my production of podcasts during this period of time so that you've got more entertainment to listen to and to check in with people's amazing travel experiences and how traveling around the world has changed their lives in all sorts of different dimensions. If you like the content on the Global Travel Channel podcast show, please share it with your friends, your family members, or the people that you're in lockdown with, because we want to have more people listening to the show around the world, and we would really appreciate you doing just that. So until the next time I have the honour of being inside your set of headphones, I want to wish you all a very happy day. Stay safe and stay well, everyone. Bye for now.